Oracle of Luna is a podcast with me, Bridget Engels, as your host. Here we have conversations with real live, present-day goddesses who are actively and courageously doing their magical work in the world. Each episode is a bewitching journey with relevant discussions on topics such as Wiccan pagan spirituality, writing, culture, magical practices, art, ritual, and the craft in its many forms. Merry meet! Welcome to another episode of the Oracle of Luna podcast. I'm Bridget Engels, your host, and today I am honored to chat with the remarkable Mawiyah Kai El-Jamah Bomani. Mawiya is an 8th generation witch, Hoodoo practitioner, educator, Priestess of OYA in the Yoruba system of spirituality, Egun Medium, playwright, and she lives in New Orleans. Mawiyah's first book from Llewellyn is titled Conjuring the Calabash, Empowering Women with Hoodoo Spells and Magick. Welcome, Mawiyah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing good today. A little bit rainy outside, so I like the rain, so that's good. It helps me when I write.
Yeah, nice. All right, well, we have a lot to unpack here in a short amount of time, but you are so accomplished and have achieved so much. But I'd like to start with asking you how your spiritual journey as a witch began. Like, how did you know you were a magical person?
That's a great question. When I was very young, about 5 or 6 years old, I could see spirits. And at that age, the first person I told was my mom, naturally. And she was able to sit me down and explain, how I was born with the veil of skin over the eyes. We call it a caul. And how she was born also with the caul, and that it would allow you to be able to engage with the spirit world and not to be fearful of the spirit world, but also at the same time to be able to sort of turn it off when you need to naturally be a kid or do other things so that it wouldn't be too traumatizing to you as you mature. My mother was into astrology and she was into tarot. And so I
Mm.
can remember very early her reading those Linda Goodman books and her early tarot deck and just, kind of showing me how mysticism wasn't something to be feared. And so yeah, that was my real introduction to it. She walked me through it, walked me through how to communicate, how to find out what spirit wanted, as well as how not to be fearful, how to just manage my life and not to tell everyone because everybody wouldn't believe it or would think you were crazy and things like that, but just to be able to have those spiritual moments with her conversing about what I saw and what I was feeling.
Mm-hmm. And so you say, okay, you're an 8th generation witch. Is this passed down from your family, through your ancestors?
Yeah. Well, when I was initiated to Ifa years ago, that was one of the, I guess, opening ceremonies to that was sort of like this spiritual development where they would sit you down and they would talk, try to figure out, what ancestors were coming forward. Was it okay for you to be initiated? Did they want you to go a different path before you came into this path? Because naturally they were pulling you to this path, but was there some other work that you needed done? And so my specific development session was one of those all-nighters. It went until the next morning because so many women kept showing up. And so from that path, they saw that it was 8 generation of women who had been, working in hoodoo, working as witches, doing this work, who came forward to say that, yes, this was the right path for me to go down and that I needed to do this work because it would allow me to help heal my family of generational trauma, things like that,
Yeah,
carryovers from enslavement and stuff like that. Yes.
yeah. So how has living in New Orleans influenced your spiritual path?
Well, naturally, growing up, I went to Catholic school. There are lots of Catholic schools in New Orleans. And so I think it was when I attended Catholic school where I really learned about, Ouija boards and stuff like that. We had this one girl, she would bring all kind of, occult things to the bathroom. We would go into the bathroom and she'd have all these things there. She made a spirit board and we would, I just really got into the esoteric part of everything for me. And so just Catholic schools have always been those places too, that really just were kind of like it's kind of spooky to me in a sense. And so I think growing up with that, it was always this openness to understand that you live in a place where there is voodoo. Marie Laveau performed a lot of her ceremonies inside St. Louis Cathedral, right? And so there is this overlap of understanding that people go to church, but they still know what hoodoo and voodoo is. They still engage in those practices. So
Yeah.
for me growing up there, it was like nowhere else. We call it the most African city in the world. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's such a convergence of Indigenous, African, Creole, French,
Mm-hmm.
Spanish. It's such a magical
Hmm.
mix there.
Right, right, right. We say it's a gumbo of everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that in itself could set the stage, for magical development, spiritual development, if
Yes,
you're
and I
open
think
to
I
it.
think it yeah, I think it really did because you get a little bit of everything, right? And so you know how to pull in everything into your working. So even if you're working with saints, right, you can still
Mhm.
work with those saints in as part of your hoodoo practice. And so for me, yeah, it was all of it. It was just being able to not have to say, well, this has to be separate from this because this is not quite what we would call a spiritual practice. We pull it all in, we blend it in. A
Yeah,
lot of our celebrations in New Orleans blend everything as part
right,
of the gumbo of spirituality. So yeah.
right. So when did you start practicing hoodoo, and why is practicing hoodoo important for women of color?
Well, I started practicing hoodoo very early at a young age. My grandmother would tell me different things not to do, and she would show me different things to do. And at that time, we didn't really we would call it hoodoo, but all you wouldn't always say we're going to have a hoodoo session. We're going to learn these things. It was just things that you were naturally doing. Like if somebody cut your hair, you knew to take that hair and collect it. Don't leave it laying around. Someone could take it and do workings against you, things like that. Leaving
Yeah,
your home, don't go through the alley. Let somebody go through your alleyway, come through the front and leave out the back. So there were lots of things that I would get quizzed on. I'd have to learn, it quickly, because of the fact that people were, knowledgeable of hoodoo and people were using it to have better their lives.
mm,
And so I think for people of color, for women of color, we experienced this resurgence of African American women who are getting high, more education, PhDs and becoming all these affluent individuals. They're finding that in spaces they're the only ones a lot of times, and so racism is really prevalent in these spaces. And so they're looking for some type of spiritual protection to help them as they travel through these spaces. And so I think it's important because it allows them to feel like they can do this work from the book or any working like that in the book and move on with their day. It's quick and easy, and they can feel protected, and then they can still feel a connection to their lineage.
yeah. It's sort of a modern sorcery.
Yes, yes, I believe it is. And it invites not just older women, but and younger women. A lot of younger women are finding that they also are experiencing a lot of difficulty as they try to maneuver the world, and so they're finding that they can do these workings. They can listen to the music that they like. There's a playlist that goes with the book, and so they can listen to the music that they like, and they can still be in communion with the spirits. They can still be grounded in their work and they could
Yeah,
still, make changes in their lives. Mhm.
right. It's a way of helping them navigate the other world and also staying safe at the same time in the present world. Sounds like.
Y- Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. Because, like I said, a lot of my clients, people who have been coming to me, that has been just the battle against systemic racism and what they feel in their jobs, in their schooling. It's just a thing that they can't get through. They can't navigate through. So they feel like spirituality, just going to the church, on Sunday, is not doing it for them. So they want something that they can engage in and really get their hands
Right.
messy and feel like they're really making the change as opposed to talking to a priest, talking to a preacher, and having them say go home and say some Hail Marys or go pray and
Right.
it'll be okay.
Right.
Right, right.
It's more empowering, definitely. And
Hmm.
yeah, gives people a way to connect, have immediate connection to spirit.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
So
It
what
is.
inspired you to write Conjuring the Calabash? This book is amazing to all my listeners out there. Conjuring the Calabash is a wonderful book. It's full of rituals, spells, wonderful stories. It's just an amazing book. So, what inspired you to write Conjuring the Calabash? Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah. During the pandemic, I was getting a lot of clients, especially during lockdown, who were feeling like they didn't have a sense of what was going to happen next. They were afraid. They just felt like, the world was in this divide. And so, as we would talk about ways of healing and being in communion with each other, even over the phone, um, I would ask, is it okay, after you do this work, if I could jot down just some ideas, jot down just maybe, what happened and, how we were able to come to some kind of resolve for that. And they were good about it. They liked it and they wanted to be a part of that story, this narrative. And so I thought, what I could also talk about my own life. I didn't want it to just be a book of spells or a book of, just recipes that you crack open and you would use anytime you want. I wanted it to be a story of my life and how my life has transformed. And then I wanted to introduce the lives of other individuals and how their lives were transformed by it. And as I started to talk more with people, and they would call back and say, they had this breakthrough and they were feeling much better about themselves, I felt like I needed to share that with the rest of the world. And the way to do that would be to, write, turn it into a book. And so
Yeah.
that's what I did.
Yeah. It's definitely relatable writing in the modern context, but I really enjoyed reading your stories, the autobiographical stories, and how you got started, and just what's going on in present day life in New Orleans. It's just,
Right.
it's eye opening. And I was going to ask you, what is the calabash? The calabash symbolize to you?
Right. So the calabash in Yoruba's workings, we use it as a shekere, right? We use it as a musical instrument.
Mm,
And so what the bottom half of the calabash is kind of full figured, and we think of that bottom half as a woman, right? And
mhm.
the elongated part, which you usually hold as you play it as an instrument, we think of that as the male symbol, right? And so
Uh-huh.
the coming together of both this female and this male energy. For me, the calabash, even though it's about empowering women, it's about empowering them to the point in which they understand the interconnectedness between all of us, women and men and our children, how it all plays together, our elders. So the calabash itself, this whole idea of, the woman and the man finally seeing that they need each other. We need each other to have this growth spurt in order to transform the world. We're going to have to rely on the magic and the energy of each other. And so that's what the calabash symbolizes to me. When you play it as an instrument, it sort of wears this skirt and it has bells on it, or sometimes people have shells on the skirt. And so it's this invitation to come close, to listen, to understand what's about to happen, to
Mm.
understand your transformation. And so as you listen to it, as it plays, it sways in the wind, and all of these beautiful sounds come from it, it gives you time to really invoke the spirit within you to come forward and change.
Wow, that's powerful. And also, it sort of reminds me of the cauldron, maybe the sacred universe. It's,
Yes.
you
Hmm.
know, where all life is begins and ends.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Because, when you even making a calabash or even turning it into a shikare, you look into it, and when you look into it, there's that darkness. And that is that
Mhm.
symbol of life, right? Before everything, there's this unlimited darkness, right? And from that darkness emerges everything, our dreams, our hopes, all of it. So we
Yeah,
think about all of that when we think about the calabash, not just the birthing of children, but the birthing of our ideas. Yeah.
right, right. So you are also a playwright and an award-winning playwright. Do you weave your spirituality into your plays?
Yes, yes, I do. So usually the plays, they have this. understanding of spirit, how one can come to spirit. Sometimes the main characters are already there. Sometimes they're kind of have to remember and pull back the energy of what was lost, either by just forgetting to forget or trying to distance themselves from it. But by the end of the plays, they're pulling that story back into their right now to have some healing and
Yeah.
to transform. So yeah, so the play that I won an award for, it was definitely about an older couple who had to try and rely on their spirit, the spirit, this energy, this hoodoo energy to bring about changes. They were trying to deal with this, retiring and living in this area that was not welcoming to them, right? And so
Hmm.
how magic helped them to see that together, they could, rise above that.
What was the name of that play?
This particular play, it was called, don't get me, I've written so many plays, but
Spring Chickens,
oh my God,
maybe?
yes, Spring Chickens,
Okay.
that's it. I
Okay.
almost forgot, I forgot it. Yes, Spring Chickens.
Okay. And are you currently writing other plays?
Yes, currently I'm working on one called the Men of the Aman Ra Society. I'm making some changes to it. I wrote it a while back, but I went back and I decided that there were some changes I wanted to make it more modern into today's time. Because probably the last time I really worked on it maybe was about probably 7 years ago. And so
Hmm.
I decided to do a deep dive into just, reassessing some ideas about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm currently
Cool.
working on, as well as some children's workings. Trying to
Mm.
do some things for children because I really want to have it where magic for kids is not something that, they're afraid of, right? As they
Yeah.
start to learn more about, indigenous practices. It shouldn't be
Hmm.
something that you just learn in college, or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Should learn it
yeah,
as early as you can.
yeah.
So, as a priestess of Oya in the Yoruba spiritual system, what does that mean or what does that entail? Is there
Well,
specific
yeah,
ceremonies or divinations
yeah.
or
Yeah, there are specific initiations for once they divine and find out who your guardian Orisha is. There are always, there are other workings that you have to go through. But oh yeah, it's about transformation. She's about change.
yeah.
She is definitely, the one we go to, especially for storms and things like that. People really resonate with that. When tornadoes and stuff, you go
Because
to, oh
there's a
yeah,
lot of
for
those in New
protection.
Orleans, right?
Right. Louisiana is as a whole, right? So yeah, so transformation really, and a lot of my own work in dealing with the ancestral energy, she is one who works in that realm as well. So I do a lot of past life readings for people. And
Hmm.
so a lot of that deals with how they could transform whatever that was in the past so that they can have a clearer slate for the future or for where they are right
Oh,
now.
that's powerful work.
Yes,
Wow.
because oftentimes what I find when we do the past life work is, they're having some of the same things happening now, right? And
Yeah.
so they see that and they go, oh, well, I still feel that way. And so if we can figure out how to get past that, then
Hmm.
then we can work on, how they can better their situation. Because a lot of times those things will stunt them from their greater work. What it is I
Right.
really wanted to do. I really wanted to be a songwriter. I really wanted to do this, but I was too afraid. And then we look at those past life lessons and we see that back then you shied away from those things, you wanted to do those things and you made a decision that you would do it in the next life, and so here you are again, once again shying away from them. And so yeah, it's a lot of so Oya really allows me to step into those spaces and to help challenge people to really confront those demons that they feel within themselves.
Yeah. And we all need that with our I was just thinking about that the other day of patterns, how people have different patterns in their life that repeat over and over. And
Yes.
it's hard. It's really, it takes some deep shadow work or deep spirit work to
Mm-hmm.
get
Mm-hmm.
past those patterns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you
And
can,
often uh, we often find out too that sometimes it's your ancestors, right? They sort
right,
of have that fear as
right.
well, and so they will shoot that fear off to you, and it's from a very early point in their life that they harbor that fear, and that fear becomes a part of your DNA. and so
Mm.
they learn how to deal with that as well, because sometimes, they have their altar set up and they're talking to their ancestors, and this ancestor is still, shooting out those darts of that fear back to them. And so they have to understand how to clear it up for both parties, not just for themselves, but in jumping that hurdle, they help their ancestor as well.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to, well, I mean, it's unconscious. It's your subconscious. It's hard
Hmm.
to, I know what patterns or what ancestry in the past is holding you back,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
setting you up for failure in this present time,
Right, right.
because it's so unconscious. Interesting work. Also, you are an Egun medium. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, and that's once again, calling on the spirit of the dead, calling on the spirits of their ancestors in my work, especially with past life, figuring out which ancestor is helping to hold back that energy, hold back whatever it is that they're trying to get through. So it's a lot. So my Egun work, the working with the dead ties into, my past life work. And so Oya, because she represents the Egun and the Egungun, those dead, those ancestors, that space, it's easy for me to sit down and to talk to their ancestors and to figure out which one, wants to step forward to help with the healing and which one is holding them back.
Yeah.
So usually that's what I do. I will find out, first, what is happening with their past life. What are some of the fears that they're, still dealing with in this life? And then we start to examine which ancestors, we go into that Egun portion, who's holding you back and who's there, who's willing to step up to help you get over that hurdle. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I was just thinking while you're talking about that, how important allies are for spirit work and, just navigating the underworld or other world is it's very powerful work. And I really, really honor you for doing this work. It's complex.
It is. It really is. And it's like I always tell people, I can't rush and do like 5 or 6 of them in a day.
Yeah,
I don't know how people do that. I see people say they do. Oh, I do that. I it's usually one and then I'm done for the day. Because it takes a lot out of
right.
And
I'm
so I have
sure.
to really go back into, drinking my water, get myself back together, and just really resting, because for some people it doesn't come up really easy. The whatever it was, it's almost as if there's a barrier that,
Mhm.
the ancestors don't want that to be seen in terms of you trying to help them get over it. They're still fearful. So there's still a lot to overcome, just even being able to see the past life before you can read it. And so it really does take a lot out of you. But for me, I feel that when people come to me and I see that that is something that they may benefit from, I will bring it up to them, because oftentimes when they talk to you initially, you get a feel for, that they're constantly repeating these things, that
Yeah,
it's not something that they really feel like they have the control to change.
yeah,
It's not one of those things where it's like, people just want to get a reading and then they just don't want to do anything. You really start to feel the energy of the individual, and you start to feel that they really want to change. It's like something's holding them back. So yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But it sounds collaborative, like
Yes, it really is.
yeah.
Mhm.
So before we end here, what are some of your upcoming plans for the future? Do you have any new books or events or workshops or stuff?
Yeah, I'm working on a new book, also with Llewellyn. It's still in the works, so I'm still working on that. And then hopefully I'm working on a deck of cards, tarot cards, that deal
Oh,
with
that'll
hoodoo.
be cool.
Yeah, I think so.
Yay.
And so we'll see about classes and stuff. I'm still trying to work some things out. It's like when you're new and you're trying to figure out, what's next, what's next. So yeah, I'm still working some things out. But people can reach me at my webpage to see anything that comes up new. It's Mawiyah El-Jamah Bomani, my name.com.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. It's just been delightful chatting with you, and thank you for your creative courage and divine service and all that you do for women's empowerment and healing and spirit work. It's incredible. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. This
Yeah.
is fun.
All right. Blessed be. See you next
Blessed be.
time.